This is going to be, it's called Building Resilience in New Zealand Agriculture, but probably I could just rename it Stating the Bloody Obvious, because I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know, but sometimes it's really good to just have it framed in a way in which, hopefully, it resonates as a positive thing that you have to embrace, as opposed to a negative thing that's being imposed on you. And so, if we think about New Zealand agriculture, I mean, we can sort of like pat ourselves on the back and say it's, it's the core of New Zealand. We generate all this revenue, we sustain, the existence of our people, and we can think that we're special, we're important, we're valuable to New Zealand, but we're not special. And I think that a lot of people hate it when I say this, but I think as farmers, you have to get over this, we're special and we need to be treated in a special way. Because New Zealand, yes, agriculture is important, but tourism's important, manufacturing's important, health and education is important. The country is made up of lots of really important industries. And just like farming has got a number of challenges, and we know what those are: economic uncertainty, extreme weather events, increasing regulation, environmental sort of concerns, and changing market demands. You could go into any other industry and they're experiencing the same kinds of challenges. Like, there's nobody in New Zealand that's saying, let's make life difficult for agriculture. It's actually a thing that's happening globally. I mean, I spent some time in the UK just before Christmas. I've been in Australia. You see what's happening in America and Europe and South America. And all around the world, people, not just farmers, are experiencing a huge amount of change. And some of it's good and some of it's not. And so when you think about resilience, resilience is something that every single person in the world has to actually think about, because agriculture is not sitting there, the only industry that needs to become resilient. So let's think about, I mean, here's a picture. You could look at that and you could say, oh gosh, it's so unfair, the poor maize growers in New Zealand. But I could put a set of, snapshots of media stuff, and it could be cereal growers, it could be dairy farmers, it could be the tourism industry. Every industry, every sector of New Zealand's communities have got a page that if you put all the negative things that have happened, it can make you feel as if it's overwhelming. But the reality is that it's life. Like, this, unfortunately, is where the world, planet Earth, finds itself. And so the question is, how do we become resilient to this ever-changing situation? And so it's all about surviving and thriving in this changing world. Whether you're a farmer, whether you're a builder, whether you're a banker or whatever. And you've got to understand what resilience is going to mean to you. So what is resilience? The definition, and I mean there's lots of definitions, but this one I think is quite a good one. It's the capacity to withstand and to be able to recover quickly from stressful situations or conditions. And if you're a farmer, that could be a crop that you have lost, that's failed. It could be your farm business that's struggling. It could be you as a person, your own mental health and well-being. It could be the community that you're living in, that, Cyclone Gabrielle, or it could be New Zealand as a country. And we have to look at resilience at all of those different levels, because you can't be resilient as a country if you haven't got resilient communities and resilient people and resilient businesses. So if you're looking at agricultural resilience, then it's not just about the ability of a farm to cope, it's about the ability to be able to transform. It's the ability to change and to evolve in light of the crap that's going on around you. And so resilient agriculture, it's about being robust and adaptable to whatever comes your way. And that could be environmental legislation, it could be economic impacts, it could be social or institutional changes that are outside your control. And so, I think this is probably the take-home message is, creating resilience is the way to be a successful farmer in the world, not just in New Zealand, because you can't move forward in this ever-changing environment. The speed of change is almost exponential. And so you might think this is overwhelming, but actually it's not, because if you listen to those three growers and farmers that we had in the session at the end of yesterday, they have embraced it. They've said, okay, this is life. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to be able to adapt and change and meet what this new environment is throwing at us? So, and again, I don't apologize for trying to tell you how to suck eggs, because sometimes you do have to state the blatantly obvious in order just for it to resonate. And this is all about framing, I guess, the talks that are coming after me, because to become resilient, you need to be able to do some of the things that, for example, FAR are researching or whatever. So obviously, one of the big challenges we have is around the changing climate and the impact that's going to have on agriculture as a land-based industry. And so we have to be adopting climate-smart solutions. And there's a lot of them out there, and we should be embracing them, and we're going to talk about some of them today. You also have to think about diversification, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You have to make sure you're absolutely on top of your financial management, and really importantly, you've got to embrace being in a positive learning environment, and you have to have created networks and collaborations that can support you. And I want to just touch on each of those, because I think if you focus on those, you'll be able to see a pathway forward. So adopting climate-smart solutions, it can be anything. And I'm not here to tell you all the different ones that are there. You know, the talks coming after me will, you'll see what those options are. But we do have to look at the hybrids, the cultivars that we're using, and we have to look at them under a different lens. You know, it's not all about their yield potential now. It has to be about their drought tolerance, their heat tolerance, their pest and disease tolerance, because it's a package that is going to give you a consistent yield under changing environmental conditions, that is going to help you sort of weather your way through the storm. And you're going to have to look at a whole range of management techniques that allow your farm to be a little bit more resilient. And it could be around IPM programs, it could be around cultivation techniques or whatever. But you have to know what's out there, not just in New Zealand, but internationally. There is so much innovation and new tools and technologies coming along, and you have to be aware of what might work for your farm. Diversification is a difficult one to talk to a maize conference about, because in many cases, your business model is intensive monoculture. And intensive monoculture has been a business model for farming in New Zealand and elsewhere for many, many years, and it will be in the future for many, many years, because the reality is it's a simple farm business model, and it delivers economies of scale, and in the main it usually generates greater profits. But it does mean, under the changing climate, and it's not so much a gradual increase in temperature or a little bit of an increase in, in rainfall. It's the extreme weather events that mean that you're going to experience a risk of losing your crop. And we can see this. This is not a prediction. This is the reality. We see it in New Zealand. We've seen it elsewhere. So you have to ask yourself the question, every year, is my business model around an intensive monoculture still delivering the profit and the benefits versus the risks that I'm now, the increasing risks around losing the crop or fluctuating commodity prices or, increasing input costs. And if you look at diversification and you look at the benefits, I mean, we all know the benefits. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You get multiple revenue streams. You can withstand, market fluctuations. I mean, this is the model for a mixed cropping arable farm, where you've got multiple crops integrated with livestock. And when you get a major weather event, it's usually the mixed cropping arable farmers that will be able to get their way through that because of those multiple revenue streams. So I'm not saying that you have to do that, because you might still be making more money with your intensive monoculture, but I am saying that you should proactively ask yourself every year, is this still the best business model? Do I need to look at some opportunity for diversification to manage that risk? Because in 10 years' time, if we have 3 major weather events, one year after the other, that knocks out a maize crop and you go out of business, it's not going to be a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise because it is a potential risk. So you have to just ask yourself, finding the balance between profit and resilience. Ooh. This one is really important. And people say to me, oh, for goodness sake, Alison, you should not be telling farmers, how to manage their business. But the reality is we've just done a big programme of work funded by MPI that's where we're looking at the economic and environmental performance of a whole range of farms. And one of the comments that came out of that from a whole load of the farmers that signed up to it was, gosh, I did not fully realise exactly how much I was spending on different parts of the business. And gosh, I was surprised that actually the most profitable bit was that bit. So you have to be absolutely all over your financial management so that if you've got the opportunity to reduce input costs without compromising productivity, then you can. So it's one of those things where you've got to proactively plan and manage your finances, which a lot of people don't do, including me. I worked out that I spend far too much on my garden, and I never realised how much money I spent on my garden. It won't stop me spending that money, but at least now I realise I have completely overinvested in the garden, and I will never recoup that when I sell the house. And that's knowledge that allows you to make informed decisions. And you've also got to have some give in the system. And I mean, that is telling you how to suck eggs, because we know that there are going to be unexpected crises that are going to come up on a regular basis. And if you don't have a little slush in the system, that little bit of extra money for the rainy day, you're going to struggle to be able to, sort of cope. So you have to make sure you've got, and it's a bit like what Raywin Densley was talking about, making sure that if you're a dairy farmer, that you always have that little bit of extra feedstock just for when you need it. And this is the same with this. And the last two, learning and innovation and networks and collaboration, I can't emphasize how important that's going to be for anybody in any industry living in the world as we move forward. If you're working in isolation and you're only doing the same as what you've always done, your future will be quite challenging. But if you embrace learning and innovation, and that's what FAR is here for, that's what Pioneer and all of the support services for the agricultural sector are here for, to allow you to adopt and uptake new innovations. You need to embrace that, because that's going to help you weather those unexpected storms. And in many cases, it will help you improve productivity. And so if input costs go up, which it's most likely they will, then in many cases the only way to be able to manage that situation is to have more productivity. And so a lot of tools and technologies and new innovations will give you that. So you have to be aware of what's out there, and you have to embrace that. And it's the same with, being able to adapt to things. Everyone says, oh, New Zealand is so innovative and we're just sort of so wonderful at, coming up with new ideas, and it's the number 8 wire mentality. But I actually think, and I've spent a bit of time traveling around the world, I actually think New Zealanders have become like, we're almost turning into a whole load of sissies, because we're not embracing and changing as much as the rest of the world. And that's a big risk. And people don't like it when I say that, but just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not true. And so, don't assume that what you're doing at this moment in time is fine, because if we truly are world leaders in agriculture, world leaders never defend the status quo, because they're always innovating, they're always changing, and they're always evolving, because that's what makes you world leaders. And the All Blacks found that out the hard way, and I would hate to think that New Zealand agriculture will dig their heels in defending the status quo so much that we will lose that opportunity to embrace innovation. And the only way you can do that is to have networks and collaborations and embrace going to conferences, chatting to people, sharing ideas, sharing insights, helping your farmers down the road solve their problems. Because when you have a strong community of farmers, then you will have a strong farming industry. So this is really important. And I'm not going to have questions because I can see Andy standing there telling me I need to stop. So please don't take this as a negative, okay? This is not negative. This is a pathway forward to be able to embrace, I guess, what's happening in the world. And don't play the victim and think that these things are happening to you and only you. Every single person in New Zealand is experiencing challenges, and farmers, because you are resilient and you are technically, at the top of your game, you should be able to embrace these changes, and you should be able to find a pathway forward. And you should, like the 3 growers that we spoke to, you should continue to enjoy what you're doing and love being a farmer and be profitable. But you have to focus on how to do that, because nobody's going to come along and do it for you. And it comes back to that comment I made about personal responsibility. You can make your farm business more resilient if you choose to. And you can dig your feet in the mud and say, I'm not going to change, and then see what happens. And I would prefer that you all did the former rather than the latter. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so it's always a delicate balancing act when you're thinking about timing and you're talking to your CEO, but I think that's quite a provocative conversation that's just been had there and sets a scene for thinking about the future. So I actually think it's really important to ask if anyone's got any questions. I think we should all challenge each other. We challenge Alison just as much as we challenge you guys as growers. So anybody got any key questions, burning questions that you wanted to make at this time? Yep, this just went Grant.
Yeah, Alison, one thing that's not articulated that well is what does the future look like? Like there's always, like a lot of the pushback I tend to find is when people don't understand where the vision's taking you. And so a lot of the climate change stuff, like, you know, I remember back in probably 96, the scientists first told us about, you know, there's going to be climate change, and what does that mean? It basically means extremes. It's probably taken us till now to really see those extremes. And so what does the future look like? And the articulation of saying, well, if we do this, this will be potentially the outcome. And that's not well articulated. You know, there's always this, you have to do this type of scenario. Yeah. But, you know.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And the answer is nobody knows. You know, like for the last decade, there have been people who've made a lot of money out of being futurists, you know, and we've heard them give talks at conferences and, you know, this is the global trend and, you know, we're going to move from animal protein to plant protein and, you know, artificial intelligence is going to do this and whatever. Those days are gone because the speed of change is so quick and I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening in things like artificial intelligence that nobody really knows what the future is going to look like. You can't predict it. All you can predict is that it will change and your ability to respond to change will be what determines your success. And that is something that people find really hard to accept because I can't tell you. I can tell you probably in the next 5 years that the dairy sector is going to have to change if it wants to continue selling its milk to Nestle. But I could have told you that 10 years ago, but nobody wanted to listen. I could tell you what I think you guys should do in 10 years' time, but none of you will want to hear it, and none of you will listen. So,
this conversation could go on for a long, long time. So I think we should move on. Thank you very much, Alison, for that. Very thought-provoking. I'm sure that will continue in coffee. And to be fair, I'd love to carry the conversation on, but I'd get shot by Anna. So, look, I think what we take from that is actually you make your own way here, and you have to be proactive about what you think it's going to look like, and set your own values, like Dan said, and try to build your farm the way that you think it's going to be managed into the future. So, look, one of the things that we are dealing with as an external stressor is agrochemical availability for a variety of reasons I won't go into, right? So that